Hi, and welcome to InFocus. This is Jabbar Al-Obaidi. It is my pleasure and honor to interview Professor Mazen Qamsiya. They refer in English Qamsiya, and I will say Salamu Alaikum Shalom, peace on everybody. And I think this is, for me, when I read quickly, I have to admit, your bio is by itself is a book. You know, you have a lot of contributions on the intellectual level, and also on different aspects of subject related to sustainability, as well as to water pollution, water resources, which people are, yesterday I was talking to my family in Iraq, and actually they have a problem with getting enough water for their, not just daily need, also for their products, because some of them, they are farming. So I would like you to first, Mr. Mazen Qamsiya, to give me a kind of selective, if you will, of your background and your involvement with this issue, which everybody now is talking about, like how we can achieve peace and a lasting peace.
Thank you, Dr. Jabbar, for having me on your show. So my name is Mazen Qamsiya. I'm a professor at Bethlehem University, although I teach one course. Before this, I was in the US for nearly 3 decades, where I taught at universities like Duke and Yale universities in the medical schools. My background is initially in biology and then medical genetics. I finished my PhD in the US and did postdoctoral training in medical genetics. And then I decided to give up all this good life of teaching at places like Duke and Yale and go to Palestine, go from a 6-figure income to a 0-figure income, basically. And I'm a full-time volunteer. My wife and I founded an institute called Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, whose vision is sustainable human and natural communities. And we spend all our time now volunteering for this institute. It's an institute that does research, does education, and conservation. The institute includes a museum of natural history. It includes a museum of ethnography, a botanic garden, a community garden, a children playground, and it has many other activities which we can talk about as you like. But the idea of it, as I said, is sustainable human and natural communities in the face of global challenges ranging from climate change to settler colonialism in Palestine.
So, you just put us in a very comfortable zone for a good, productive conversation. But I'm interested to know how you, what really motivates you, as you put it nicely, you give up 6 figures or 7 figures into 0. What's that in you, Professor Qamsiya, to decide? I'm gonna refer you as the first name, so this is better.
Yeah,
because you are so desirably, you have the professorship, you have the PhD, you have the postdoctoral, you have it, my friend. So yeah, what's that? The inner motivation that makes Mazen move on that direction.
Well, when I was in the United States, my wife and I worked for human rights and for environmental justice. And then returning to Palestine to do this full-time volunteerism was an important step in our lives. And it's important because what motivates us? What motivates us is that we, as a human species, not as Palestinians or Arabs, or Americans for that matter, as a human species, as you know, we face huge challenges. Climate change alone is impacting everywhere. It's reducing food production, it's causing unpredictable weather, hurricanes, floods, etc. This has been something I've been working on for some 40 some years. And only recently more people are becoming interested in it, and that's good because they started to feel it, they started to see it. So what motivates me basically is a motivation of survival for our species, for our civilization, for decency, and for fellow creatures that live on this planet, animals and plants that share this beautiful blue planet. We must all work together to ensure sustainability. And this is what motivated us to set up this Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, and what motivates us to keep going. And it's being involved in a cause bigger than ourselves and dedicating our lives to it is a way that we human beings actually live a more fuller and more productive life. After all, we all will die one day, so we should leave this planet a better place than what was handed down to us.
Thank you so much for this really very moving reply or answer. Now, tell me a little bit about the Institute. It's very interesting, biodiversity. You know, you didn't work with the word inclusion or inclusive. You went by diversity. And tell us some background and what the you know the mission or the targeted audience and what has been done so far. Thank you.
So, as I mentioned, the vision is sustainable human and natural communities, but this is, you know, the vision long-term, what we are aiming for. The mission and goals are more important, and they relate to how we get there and how we proceed to do this. And so what is this institute about? It's basically how we as human beings should relate to our surroundings. First, our motto at our institute is respect. First level of respect is self-respect. We as Palestinians, as human beings, should respect ourselves. This is empowerment. This is ability to change our own circumstances. That's empowerment, is self-respect. The second level of this respect is respect for other human beings, regardless of their religion or background or ethnicity or political affiliations. And the third level of respect is respect for nature, for the animals and plants that share this beautiful planet with us. So these three levels of respect, they lead us to an action plan, goals and directions. And these involve things like research. We publish about 2 research papers every month from our institute on areas like climate justice, environmental justice, biodiversity, sustainable agriculture, food sovereignty, climate change education, and so on. That's research, and research is very important. Second is education, and that involves education at all levels of our society, from children as young as 4 or 5 years old to 90-year-old students of knowledge, if you want. We even have a mobile educational unit that goes to remote areas, reaches out to marginalized communities like Bedouin communities, villages, women in rural areas, farmers, etc. And the third aspect, besides research and education, is community service and conservation. And these are linked because you cannot really conserve nature if you don't also protect the people around that nature. And as you know, Palestine is under colonial occupation, which is damaging to our environment, damaging to people, damaging to nature. And so protecting human communities is associated also with protecting nature.
Let's go to the basic. People, of course, understand perhaps the word peace or the connectivity between peace and human rights. Can you shed some lights on this so people, they kind of paint their own picture when they make the connection between human rights and peace?
It's an issue that always is on our minds, especially coming from our region of the world, which recently has been in turmoil, if you want, or as they used to call them in Ireland, the troubles, if you want. We have troubles in the Middle East, in the Arab world, in North Africa, and Western Asia. I prefer, by the way, the term Western Asia over the term Middle East for obvious reasons. Middle East is relating to Europe and colonialism and so forth. But anyways, in Western Asia, we have problems that started a lot by Europeans, like the Sykes-Picot Agreement that divided the Arab world and in that part of the world, etc. Now these...
It was 1916, right?
1916, yes. So the question is really, what is this about, and whether this conflict, this turmoil is kind of congenital for the Middle East, and it is not. You know, our region has been relatively peaceful for thousands of years, with very few occasions of conflict. For me, since your question is about peace, as you said, what is peace? Peace, for me, as Mazen, you know, peace for me is that you're living, you're not harming other human beings or other creatures that live on this earth. You're not destroying nature, you're not uprooting trees, you're not bombing the shit out of a particular refugee camp. Or something. That's first, number one, as we say in my background of medical genetics, first do no harm. First do no harm. When you don't do any harm, then the next step is to live in harmony. And harmony means that you live with other people and with other animals and plants on this planet, so that it's in a way that's sustainable for everybody, every living thing. For humans, that means people of various religions, for example. My family background, for example, is Christian. There are Muslims, there are Jews, there are Baha'i, there are atheists, there are people of various beliefs and ethnicities, and we should respect those. I go back to that motto I mentioned earlier, respect. That diversity needs to be nurtured and protected. And here I want to say something. Diversity is strength, it's not a weakness. If you come to an area of a forest, for example, and see only one kind of tree or one kind of animal, you don't say that's a healthy forest. You say that's a forest in decline. The same for human communities. You need diversity. Diversity is strength. It's not a weakness. So biodiversity and human diversity both need to be nurtured and protected. To me, that's definition of peace. That's definition of peace. Peace is not the absence of war, as I think it was Martin Luther King who said it. Peace is the presence of harmony and justice and decency and survival. That's what peace is.
Yeah, and what's the relation between peace and human rights in the 21st century? I mean, how the connection between the two?
I mean, I think the only difference in the 21st century from, let's say, the 15th or 14th century is that there was always injustice in the world. There was always attempts to start wars, and there were always wars. There was always racism, colonialism, etc. But there is a difference now. when King Leopold, for example, in the Belgian army, committed genocide in the Congo for chocolates, basically, that was kind of a local problem, and only Congolese people died, and it's finished. As sad as it may be, but now in the 21st century, we're all so connected that it is impossible to have that kind of thing for people to get away with it and not influence everywhere else. You can see this, how things are connected in the 21st century with issues like Ukraine and Palestine, South Africa under apartheid, how it changed. All of these things show that in the late 20th century, early 21st century, where we are in now, humans are connected globally, for good or bad. By the way, there's also bad globalization, which I'm sure as director of global programs, you understand there's globalism that's kind of neo-colonial, neoliberal, commercialist globalization that's negative. But there's globalization that's positive. Evidence of this here, I'm interviewing with you over Zoom. And I've never met you in person, so except through this medium. So we are more connected now than ever before. And our troubles are also all connected, as our successes, as our good things in the world. When somebody develops new permaculture technology in Australia, I know about it as Mazen, living in Palestine under Israeli colonialism and occupation and under the boot of the Israeli occupier. I learned about a new technology in Australia. That was not possible 100 years ago or 50 years ago even.
Yeah, so let me since you mentioned this conflict, everybody is for peace, everybody for sustainability, at least in terms of institutions, academia, some policymakers. In your role as educators, I would say as a thinker, visionaries, that you come up with these actually very engaging ideas. How you can contribute to bringing or materialize the peace between the communities in your area, because this is really important. So as they say, you start from, where you are, and then you expand using the same mission and the same peaceful tools.
Yeah, that's a very good question. First, I must slightly disagree with you that everybody wants the same thing. There are people who want pacification. There are people who want real peace. There are people who want billions of dollars. There are people who just want to be able to put food on the table if they have a table. Most of the world actually is in poverty, and they don't even have tables. They sit and try to make ends meet, try to eat. There are people literally starving to death around the world, and what their concern is food, for example, or simply to get a medicine for their children. So what people are after depends on their background and what they are interested in. Now, as an academic, in addition to being an activist, by the way, I'm also a nonviolent activist. I was arrested even many times for my activism on many fronts. But anyway, that's not the point. Is as Mazen, what is it that I look at as an observer of the human condition, if you want? And what the human condition is, I think many others better than me analyzed it and and dissected it, even from the time Mark Twain here in this country, for example, analyzing the human condition, if you want, and how greed drives aspects of it, etc. Now, I say this because, as an observer of this human condition, you try to make diagnoses, and then you try to offer therapies, but you can only offer therapy for yourself, for your immediate community. You cannot fix the world. You try, but anyways. So my background is medical genetics, and I say in medicine, there are 5 pillars of modern medicine: taking patient history, taking the patient's current symptoms, making the right diagnosis, number 3. Number 4 is to offer the right therapy, and number 5 is to give the patient prognosis or what's likely to happen. If I take climate change, for example, you can do the same kind of analysis. What's the history of this climate change? What's the symptoms? What's the right therapy? And what's the likelihood of success as prognosis, etc. The same for colonial struggles, for example, in Palestine. Let me take Palestine as an example because it's the one I'm most familiar with, but we can apply the same to Ukraine or Syria or Iraq or anywhere else. For Palestine, it's very simple. A patient history, as I mentioned, is that we're the first part of the Fertile, we're the western part of the Fertile Crescent. Iraq and Western Iran are the eastern part of the Fertile Crescent. The patient has been very healthy. It's not a congenital problem, living in harmony with nature for thousands of years. Okay, that's a patient history. It excludes congenital problems. So then you go to current symptoms and you analyze them. And without going into the details now, we don't have time, but when you analyze the symptoms, you get the diagnosis. What's the diagnosis here? It's called settler colonialism. Palestine before 1948 was multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and even multilingual society, 44 languages spoken in Palestine before 1948. And it was to be transformed to become the Jewish state of Israel with the monoculture, mono-religion, mono-language, Hebrew, etc. This is what happened. This is the symptomology. And it's classic symptomology of settler colonialism. Okay, then you look at settler colonialism globally, it's everywhere. Every country had it. There's not one country that escaped it. And what happened to them? And you see that most countries had the outcome, like 98% of the countries, had the outcome where the descendants of the colonized and the descendants of the colonizers live in one country. As happened, for example, in Latin America, all the countries of South America, Central America, Caribbean islands, Puerto Rico, etc.
So let me jump, if you allow me. So, we are aware of the history, but my point is, since we are working, everybody in their own ways toward peace, I think negotiation is one tool, and United Nations been using that, and there are the evidence that sometimes because the lack of negotiation, lack of really good faith communication, kind of dramatize some of the issues around the world. That's my point. I mean, because what you're doing is an honorable work, and should be always, part of even individual mission. I mean, and never mind, you are an activist, which I admire and respect. But I'm trying just to get to the point that we need to push the envelope a little bit for negotiation, since we are talking about peace, and peace is not just peace with this country and that. So everywhere there's a conflict, we should strive to negotiate and to reach an agreement that I know most of the agreements are in history that not necessarily make everybody equals. That's true. As we teach decolonization and trying to make sure that we include everybody. But in interest of time, thank you for that information. Now, I know also you're concerning about, and peace is also related to the water and the resource now, and there's a shortage of it, and also there's a conflict over it as we speak. What's your say on that, please? And we have less than 3 minutes.
Yeah, very simply, in colonial and anti-colonial struggles, you have a disparity of power like this. And so basically with water, the same thing. Israel takes 95% of Palestinian water, and even the part that they allow us to have, they make us pay for our own water. This is a water conflict, if you want. There's no lack of water in Palestine. As I said, it's part of the Fertile Crescent, rich in water. There's more rainfall in Ramallah, for example, than there is in London, but we have an unequal distribution of water. So to resolve issues like this, whether it's water issues, natural resource issues, whatever, you really need to talk about, as Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi said, and their challenges to empire, is you have to push the envelopes, which is what you also said. You have to push the envelope in a way to get justice, to get human rights, and human rights is central. Without human rights, you cannot have peace. When George Bush passed the what he called the roadmap to peace in the Middle East in 2001, I believe, or 2002, there's 2,218 words in this document, but it's missing 4 key words: human rights and international law. So to achieve negotiations, you have to start with these 2 elements, human rights and international law. And if we start with those, we can get somewhere. If we ignore them and eliminate them from the equation and just put the fox to negotiate with the hens, then you're not going to get somewhere.
So as you know, Bridgewater International City of Peace, could you talk about this as a concept, as an organization, as members, of the community joining this organization to make sure that people understand peace and people start to contribute on their own way?
Yeah, that's a good thing to end on with a positive thing. I was head of a group, an organization called Palestinian Center for Rapprochement Between People, where we have Israelis and Palestinians and internationals joining hand to work in joint struggle for peace and justice. When I was arrested even more than a dozen times, half the times I was arrested with Israeli Jews who are working with us for human rights, for peace, for justice. So we ask everybody who's listening to this, who are seeing me, to please join us in the struggle for human rights. You can go to our website, palestinenature.org, connect with us, info@palestinenature.org. And we welcome you to come to Palestine. And Bethlehem itself, where I live, is called the City of Peace. That's where Jesus was born, of course, Prince of Peace. So we ask you to join us in the struggle for peace. And I'm speaking to you from Bridgewater, of course, and I'm so honored to have spoken earlier to a group of people who believe, like I do, in peace and in human rights. Thank you.
Professor Mazen Qamsiyeh, thank you so much for this important talk, and wish you well. And for our audience, thank you for watching InFocus, and we'll see you next week. Have a good day.